Felicia Hill, your defensive driving instructor, and now we are ready for the road, beginning session 2. In this session, we'll turn our attention to factors that make up your driving environment. You, the driver, your vehicle, everyday driving conditions, situations that drivers face. Please turn to page 9 in your course guide and we'll review the objectives for this session. Upon completion, you should be able to list the factors you can control before you start to drive, including your own physical and emotional mental conditions in vehicle maintenance. You will describe the varying physical, emotional, and mental conditions of drivers on the road and explain how to be alert and defensive when sharing the road with them. The key is defensive. Also, explain how to drive defensively in conditions beyond your control, such as light, weather, road conditions, and traffic mix. Recognizing these conditions and knowing how to adjust your driving is key to being a defensive driver. Remember that your best defense is to use the DDC collision prevention formula. The formula is at the top of page 4 in your course guide, and it's probably a test question. So let's talk about the physical conditions we and other drivers may experience while driving. Please turn to page 10 in your course guide. What physical conditions may drivers experience that can contribute to collisions? How about fatigue? Fatigued drivers may cause collisions because they are less alert and need more time to react. What other physical conditions can you think of? Some examples are the age, the mobility, the hearing, the vision. How about if they're ill or taking medicine, or if they're fatigued or drowsy? Okay, let's talk about defensive driving techniques for each of these conditions, beginning with age. We all make assumptions about the characteristics of young versus old. The fact is that age affects everyone differently. In the young column, we see characteristics that we usually associate with young people that are 25 years and younger. They have better eyesight and hearing, better mobility, faster reaction time, and lack of experience in hazard recognition. In the mature column, we see characteristics usually associated with the mature people that are 55 years and older. Diminished hearing and vision, more limited mobility, such as they are not able to turn their neck, slower reaction time, so they can't hit the brake fast enough, more experience, they've been driving for such a long time. Now, in between those two columns, we have a gray area. Do young people always have better vision than mature people? Do mature people always have more experience? Many mature people must learn how to drive out of necessity when they're in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, which is great. I hope I'm one of them. The point is that most of us fell somewhere within the gray area. A driver might be young with great reaction time, but also have diminished vision. So it's important to recognize your own characteristics and understand you will encounter various combinations of these characteristics on the road. Let's start with defensive driving techniques related to mobility. Have you ever woken up with a sore neck? Of course you have. You've had a bad pillow like I have. Now, how difficult is it to drive in that condition? It can be challenging, is what I will say. But that's something that can happen to anyone and not only mature drivers. A person with diminished mobility could have difficulty in checking your blind spots, completely turning your neck around to check those blind spots. You need to. You should always make sure you're doing that. And how about maneuvering the vehicle? Turning the steering wheel all the way around to make a complete turn. What are some appropriate defensive driving techniques for diminished mobility? How about drive vehicles with power accessories, brakes, steering windows? You need to install large, well-placed mirrors in the vehicle. Wear your safety belts for protection and support at all times. Sit on a cushion to make the seat firmer and more comfortable. Let's talk about defensive driving techniques for diminished hearing. Drivers with hearing limitations may have difficulty hearing emergency vehicle sirens, the traffic sounds, the vehicle sounds. What are some appropriate defensive driving techniques for diminished hearing? Keep the volume of the radio low enough to hear outside sounds. Ask passengers to speak at low levels. And don't forget to check that mirror every 3 to 5 seconds. And never wear headsets while driving. That actually is more of a distraction. Let's move along to defensive driving techniques for diminished vision. Consider these facts. Vision is 90% of our sensory input. You may experience diminished vision at night or dusk, and vision issues include near or farsighted and/or night blindness. What are some appropriate defensive driving techniques for diminished vision? How about don't wear tinted glasses or sunglasses for night driving? Turn your head completely to check blind spots and recheck before making a move. And wear your glasses at all times. Don't do what I did. At 16, I was starting to lose my eyesight and I couldn't see if I had a red or green light, so I knew I needed glasses. Keep your windows and windshield clean inside and out. That would help you. How about defensive driving techniques for illness or medication? So illness and medication can cause a slower response time, can make you drowsy and inattention. So what would you do in case you had to take medicine or you were ill? How about don't drive a long distance? Don't drive under the influence of alcohol or drugs. And use the what-if hazard recognition strategy to stay alert. Check the label on your medicine. When the label specifies possible adverse effects, reconsider driving. And then how about take a taxi or an Uber? The last physical conditions we need to consider are fatigue and drowsiness. Fatigue and drowsiness are caused by a lack of sleep and by driving in heavy traffic. How about monotonous roads and highways, bad weather for a long stretch, or your vehicle's too warm? How about the appropriate defensive driving techniques for fatigue or drowsiness? How about take rest breaks? Stop and eat something. Listen to the radio. Open the window for fresh air. How about stop, get out, and go for a walk? In addition to physical conditions, we need to be aware of the emotional and mental conditions that affect our driving ability. Think about some driving situations that really upset you. What are some of the most irritating and stressful driving situations that come to mind? How about those tailgaters? How about traffic? How do you feel when this happens to you? Some examples are you're nervous, you're frustrated, you're angry. Well, it all comes out in your driving. And you react by becoming aggressive. You grip the steering wheel, you tense up. You may even give somebody the bird. Did it make you really help get you down the road any faster? No, it just made your blood pressure go up. We can't predict what another driver may do. We just need to let that aggressive driver go by and get ahead of us so you can get away from them. Let them go hit somebody else down the road. Don't let them hit you. That's how I always say it. Stress is a mental condition that we experience on the road. We all have stress, but a collision or vision will only increase our stress, especially when your only vehicle is in the shop and you have to get back and forth to work. It's one thing to understand the importance of remaining in control emotionally in driving, but doing the right thing when we suddenly find ourselves in these situations is difficult. We need to gain control of our emotions that affects our driving. Now that we've talked about the condition of the driver, let's talk about the condition of the vehicles. The law requires that I have my vehicle in safe operating condition at all times. We're going to watch a video about how to keep your vehicle ready for the road.
It really pays to know how your vehicle operates and how to keep it in shape. I'm here to share with you a few points that could help you, your family, and keep your vehicle in shape. Engine oil is the single most important component to your engine's health. It cleans, cools, and lubricates the moving and rotating components of the engine. That is why it is important to check your engine's oil level every time you fill your tank. Check the owner's manual to determine if you should look at the engine oil when the engine is warm or cool, and to ensure that you are using the correct grade and viscosity. To check your engine oil, make sure the engine is off. Remove the dipstick, wipe it off, reinsert the dipstick, and remove it again. Check the level of the engine oil and compare it to the indicators on the stick. When adding oil, make sure it is of the same grade and viscosity. Not all oils mix well together. Most manufacturers recommend changing your oil every 3,000 miles or 3 months. However, you should always check the owner's manual to see if there is a change due to changes in season, climate, or temperature. Oftentimes, these things may require a different grade of oil for your vehicle. Checking the engine's coolant level is equally as important. If the engine coolant level is low, the engine may overheat. Do not open the radiator cap of a warm engine. Instead, look at the markings on the overflow tank. If the level is below the minimum, add a 50-50 mix of antifreeze and water. The condition and level of your transmission fluid is very important. Fluid that is too high or too low could cause damage to your transmission. The level should be between the two lines on the dipstick. Checking brake fluid is very important. Often it can be seen by looking through the reservoir. If the fluid level is low, it could be an indication of worn parts or leakage in the braking system. If the color is off, it could indicate normal wear of the braking fluid or overheating of the braking system. In either case, the fluid should be changed. Take a look at the battery terminals. If you see corrosive buildup, cracks, or other damage, replace it. While under the hood with the engine off and cool, you can inspect your belts and hoses. To inspect the hoses, look along the ends of the hoses for leakage. Look along the edges of the hoses for bubbling or bruising. When inspecting your belts, look for shininess on the back side of the belt or fraying on the underside of the belt. Clean windows are critical. Just a second's glare can render hazards totally invisible, but your car has two tools that can help you keep your windshield clean: wipers and washer fluid. Road grime and dirt wear away the edge of the wiper blades, reducing their ability to clean. It can be dangerous, but wipers are easy to clean. Just wipe them down with a paper towel or rag. Generally, you should replace wiper blades every 4 to 6 months, or if they are hard, cracked, or brittle. Make sure that the tires on the vehicle are the size recommended in your vehicle's owner's manual. That's because the speedometer, ABS, traction control, and other systems are all calibrated to work with that tire size. Look for the manufacturer's recommended tire pressure for your car. It is important to fill your tires to the correct inflation levels. Not enough, and you get lower mileage, and it can lead to blowouts or tread separation. Too much or uneven tire pressure can lead to premature tire wear, and with many newer cars, a malfunction in the ABS, traction control systems, and the transfer case. Also check the wear and tread pattern of the tires. Tire wear should be even across the tire. Uneven wear could be an indication that there is a malfunction in the suspension system. Stick a penny into the tire tread, Lincoln's head, first. If the tread reaches the top of his forehead or even less, consider buying new tires to make sure you are safe. If your tires are still in good shape, prevent unnecessary wear by rotating them every 6 months or 5,000 to 7,500 miles. And don't forget to check the spare. Before you get into any vehicle, it's a good idea to walk around and check to ensure that all of your lights are free from mud, snow, and other things that can block the light. Also, check under your car or your garage floor for any signs of fluid leakage. When you get into your car, fasten your safety belt and make sure your passengers do too. Then, start the engine. The lights come on as the car does a self-test. Scan the gauges to ensure they are all functioning. Look for warning lights that stay on after the self-test. Warning lights go on for a reason. Amber lights don't require immediate attention, but warn of something that should be taken care of in the near future. Red lights often mean you should stop your engine now. It really pays to know how your vehicle operates and how to keep it in shape. If you take care of your vehicle, it will take care of you.
Please turn to pages 12 and 13 in your course guide. The video discussed some great points that deserve follow-up. For example, the condition of your own vehicle is one you can control. Keeping it in top form will help you maintain control in all types of driving conditions. What are some vehicle problems that can contribute to a collision? How about worn out tires? How about improper tire inflation? Your signals aren't working, your headlights are out, your taillights are out, your brakes are bad. So describe a time when one of these problems affected your ability to drive safely. Keeping your vehicle in top form will help you maintain control in all types of driving conditions. As a way to prevent many vehicle-related hazards, we need to do a pre-trip vehicle inspection. The video gave us examples of things to check, such as lights, mirrors, wipers, tires, and the vehicle for leaks. Always make a pre-trip vehicle check a habit. Always check on your tires. Just check everything out. Make sure it's working. What's the other belt that could be working when you drive? How about the safety belt? The laws of physics. Don't know who you or your family are. If you break those laws, you and your family are not excused from the consequences. We've already talked about things you can do to prepare your vehicle for the road. Don't forget that your car is also equipped with protective devices. One of the personal choices you can make as a driver is to protect yourself every time and all passengers when you get behind the wheel. This video will show you how safety belts, airbags, and child safety seats protect you during the 3 stages of impact. This is an awesome video. Let's watch it. I hope you enjoy it.
There's 3 collisions that are involved in a motor vehicle crash. The first one is that of the car. When the car comes traveling at a speed and comes to the sudden stop, that's the car hitting something.
And then there's the people inside the vehicle that bounce around kind of like pinballs, and that's the second collision.
At the moment of impact, safety belts absorb the force of the crash of belted occupants. But unbelted occupants remain traveling at the vehicle's original speed.
A lot of people hit the ceiling of the car, the roof of the car. A lot of times they hit the dashboard. We see some really severe chest injuries, but the head injuries really are the worst. Those are the ones that are hardest to do something about.
If you're unbelted, you have a greater risk of being ejected from the automobile. If you are ejected from the vehicle, your risk of injury and death increases about 25 times.
People can move through the air at 100 miles an hour and hit the concrete, hit trees, hit buildings, hit other cars. People that are thrown free of the vehicle never wake up. I mean, those are the people that never come in after a collision because they're just dead. They're just plain dead.
The seatbelt keeps you in the car. In the event of a crash, the main thing it does is it keeps you within the body of the vehicle.
When people are belted, you see a different kind of injury pattern. I mean, there are injuries that we can fix. There are things we can do things about.
The third collision is actually inside the body itself. Your heart, your lungs, your liver, your spleen, your brain continuing to travel at 60 miles an hour, and it slams up against the interior components of your body. And that's where you can sustain the internal damage that frequently results in the injuries and death that we see.
The seatbelt is the difference between coming into the emergency room from the collision and walking out an hour later, or staying in the hospital for months, you know, and so it's frustrating because they don't have to be hurt that badly.
Cars today are much safer than they were in the past, and they continue to develop new technologies to make them even safer. But all of these new systems still depend upon safety belts to work successfully.
Cars are designed to keep the passenger compartment intact, so they're a tough box, sort of a tough protection shell around you. Many times you can have rollovers, multiple rollovers, but as long as you're safely contained within your seat, those rollovers won't hurt you. The airbag system is designed to be used with a seatbelt. Those airbags deploy with tremendous speed and force. They're designed to be used in conjunction, where the seatbelt keeps you in place, keeps your chest, your torso, and your head in place. The airbags deploy to try to decrease any further damage that may occur.
Seatbelts, you guys.
When you get in the car and you fasten your safety belt, you should make sure that every individual that's in that car does the same thing. Because if you don't, that person who chooses not to wear their seatbelt becomes a missile within the car.
So we had a case where somebody was restrained in the back seat and the front seat passenger wasn't, and as they were ejected through the rear window, they kind of had this atomic headbutt and killed the person behind them. I mean, that's like a 180-pound cannonball that went right through their head.
Every year, more than 3.5 million people are injured in collisions, and over 40,000 people die in crashes.
Probably the most difficult aspect of my job being an emergency physician is informing a family member of the death of a loved one. That occurs in motor vehicle trauma. It's a tragedy. It's the hardest thing for us to deal with. It's even harder when you know that that person could be alive today if they had simply worn a seatbelt.
Always wear a lap belt low and snug across your hip.
That offers free child safety seat checks. How about Dallas Police? DPD trains officers to install child safety seats for the citizens. So send them to DPD if you get this request. Conditions you can't control. Turn to page 17 in your course guide. What are some adverse light conditions? How about too much light? Too little light? How about sun glare, reflected light, high beams from oncoming vehicles, or high beams from vehicles behind? Boy, that's irritating, isn't it? What defensive driving techniques can you use when there is too much light and when there's too little light? How about use a sun visor or wear sunglasses? Keeping a following distance. Increase your following distances on cars. If there's a vehicle behind you with a high beams, how about move over and let them pass you? Slow down. If there's too little light and you're not able to see, how about slow down? That's always a good answer. Page 18 in your course guide provides defensive driving techniques for driving in adverse weather conditions. What are some adverse weather conditions? How about rain, fog, snow, dust? What defensive driving techniques can you use in these conditions? Decide whether it is absolutely necessary to drive or continue to drive. Use the windshield wipers and wiper fluid. How about turn your headlights on? Defrost. Love that setting. Use the low beam headlights to see if it's fogging. What are adverse road conditions? How about narrow roads or potholes? Well, that's Dallas for you. No road on the shoulder. Curving roads, hilly steep roads, or road construction. So what would you do in this condition? How about slow down, increase your following distance, maintain control, obey worker zones instruction. Work zones are road conditions we frequently encounter in our everyday driving. They pose hazards because so much is happening. Hazards can include other vehicles, workers, or equipment. 2 important facts. This is important. Make sure you understand. Every year, many workers are killed or injured in work zones and never return home. Most states have special penalties for traffic violations in work zones, such as doubled fines. In a work zone, your best defense is to slow down and stay alert and be patient. What are some other appropriate defensive driving techniques in work zones? How about watch for the orange work zone signs? Get into the correct lane well in advance. Prepare to merge and watch for merging vehicles. Allow plenty of following distance, 6 seconds. Watch for flaggers and workers and be prepared to stop. Let's move on to the traffic mix on page 20 in your course guide. What vehicle is the worst vehicle to drive next to? How about the most dangerous? One of the biggest complaints we hear almost daily is traffic was terrible. Traffic conditions include different types of traffic, a traffic mix. While you can control your vehicle's condition, you cannot control the mix of traffic you encounter on the road. Emergency vehicles? How about larger vehicles? School buses? Slow-moving vehicles? Trains? Bicycles? Motorcycles? When we hear an emergency vehicle approaching, our best defense is to cover the brake until we locate the emergency vehicle and take corrective action. Generally speaking, you should move to the right if the emergency vehicle is approaching from behind. Move to the right shoulder of the road and stop if possible. If it is in the left lane, move into the lane to your right. If moving right is not possible, move to the right side of the lane until the emergency vehicle has passed. States with the move-over law require specific responses to emergency vehicles stopped on the road or the road shoulder. These responses include lowering your speed and/or multi-lane roads, moving one lane away from the emergency vehicle. Page 20 of your course guide provides general guidelines for dealing with large vehicles while driving. One of the most common types of large vehicles we encounter in traffic is the 18-wheeler. Sharing the road safely with larger vehicles requires recognizing the differences between your vehicle and the larger vehicles, showing courtesy around larger vehicles, so that helps them see you too. Maintaining a safe following distance is a simple defensive technique for minimizing large vehicle hazards. A safe following distance helps you to see around these large vehicles and helps those vehicle operators to see you. Here are some special considerations when you're driving near a large vehicle. Larger vehicles have bigger blind spots called their no zone. Larger vehicles need more space to make the turn, and larger vehicles take longer to stop. Following on page 21 of your course guide, we discuss stopping distance. Let's look at an example of stopping distance in this slide. At 30 miles an hour, it takes a car 153 feet to stop in good conditions. Now look at how many feet it takes for a tractor-trailer or semi-truck driving 30 miles an hour to stop. It's 177 feet. Now look at 55 miles an hour. A car takes about 346 feet to come to a complete stop. A large vehicle comes to a complete stop at 477 feet. That's 131 more feet than a car. These numbers represent good driving conditions. Now look at 55 miles per hour. A car takes about 346 feet to come to a complete stop. A large vehicle comes to a complete stop at 477 feet. That's 131 feet more than a car. And these numbers represent good driving conditions. Now you know why I always get behind the 18-wheeler. What options do you have if a larger vehicle is following too closely? You increase the following distance behind the vehicle ahead of you. You slow down and allow the driver to pass. You change lanes if it is safe and clear to do so. Refer to page 21 of your course guide as we talk about school bus hazards. School buses are another common vehicle we encounter that affects traffic mix. School buses mean children, and children don't always use their best judgment when getting on and off a bus. What do you need to know and do when you approach a school bus? Always slow down. If the amber lights on the bus are flashing, the bus is about to stop. If the red lights are flashing and the stop arm is extended, the bus is stopped. Do not pass a school bus with red flashing lights or an extended stop arm. Now I want to show you a video of an unsafe driver going around a bus.
Here she comes. Let's go right there. Yeah, that's police. All right, she has been caught. Justice has been served.
Trains are part of the traffic mix because they intersect the roads and the highways and because they affect traffic conditions. Think about how some drivers react when they see railroad crossing lights go on and the guard arms going down. Good judgment is the most important defense a driver can use when approaching a rail grade crossing. When approaching a rail grade crossing, scan left, right, and back again. Always inspect and check for trains at any time when approaching a crossing. When approaching a rail grade crossing, scan left, right, and back again. Always inspect and check for trains at any time when approaching a crossing. And never drive around lowered gates. Check for a second train at double or triple tracks. If your vehicle stalls in the tracks, get out and run away. Never try to beat a train. It's traveling so much faster than it appears and takes much longer to stop. And never cross the tracks until the signals stop flashing and the crossing arms go up. Do not always rely on warning signals to alert you to an approaching train. Not all crossings require flashing lights and gates, so always look, listen, and live. Now I want to show you an educational train video. It's pretty funny. Hope you enjoy it. Well, I hope you enjoyed that fun train video. Now we're going to talk about slow-moving vehicles. So, vehicles that display this sign says that they may not travel faster than 25 miles an hour. So this is what you need to do if you come up behind one. You need to slow down, use the 3-second minimum following distance, which will allow you to see around them, and then pass when it is necessary and safe. Pedestrians also affect traffic. Almost half of the pedestrians killed or injured entered the street between intersections. Many were children younger than 15. Some points we need to be aware of when driving in areas with pedestrian traffic are: give pedestrians a human dimension. You can't predict what they will do, so slow down. We know that. Drivers should yield the right-of-way to pedestrians in crosswalks. Drivers should never wave pedestrians across the street. In heavy traffic areas, other drivers might not see us waving them and they would hit the pedestrian. And watch for children in residential areas, school zones, playgrounds. Bicycles may also present a hazard on the road. Some tips: when driving defensively, you're already scanning the road for hazards. Pay extra attention when a bicyclist is present. So be courteous. Make sure the bicyclist knows you're there to avoid surprises and collisions. Sometimes there's a bicycle lane on the side of the road, which I've only seen in College Station. Only bicycles are allowed in this lane. No motorcycles, skateboards, or pedestrians are allowed. Motorcycles may also present a hazard in the traffic mix. Motorcycle riders are more exposed and less protected than drivers of enclosed vehicles. That's common sense, isn't it? In addition, they may have limited side vision. So cooperate with the motorcyclists on the road. They have the same rights to the road than you do. So use common sense, courtesy, and the law when interacting. Use the what-if strategy when driving near them, and use a safe following distance when driving behind them. Now let's turn to page 23 for the discussion of animal hazards. Another hazard you may encounter on the road is animals, a very dangerous mix with our vehicles, and here's why animals present driving hazards. You can't predict where or when an animal might cross the road. Crashes are caused by direct hits or swerving to miss an animal on the road. And large animals, such as deer, cattle, bears, cause major vehicle crashes. And smaller animals may also pose a danger as drivers because they may swerve to miss them. Experts advise hitting an animal instead of trying to swerve. Swerving may be more of a dangerous option because you risk running off the road and crashing. Hitting an animal is not without its risk, but it may be the safer of the two.
Okay, let's get started with section 3. I'm Willie Reynolds, and I'm going to be teaching this section to you as well. I want you to think about the 5 most important people that I asked you to list earlier. And the reason is, I have some statistics that I want to share with you. Now, choose 2 of those people and draw an X through their names. And the reason is, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration states that 3 out of every 10 Americans driving will be involved in an alcohol-related traffic collision at some time in their lives. So, of those 5 people whose names you wrote down, 1 or 2 could be killed or injured by an alcohol or drug-impaired driver. This section is not just about alcohol abuse and driving. We're going to discuss impaired driving in general, as well as distracted driving and fatigue driving. Impaired and distracted and fatigued driving will significantly increase your chance of killing or injuring yourself or someone. This is true regardless of the vehicle or road conditions. Again, it's all about choices you make. Let's turn to 25 in your course guide, and we're going to review the section objectives. Upon completion of this section, you should be able to describe the characteristics of impaired driving, distracted driving, a fatigued driver, and an aggressive driver. Identify actions you can take when you experience or encounter those characteristics on the road. Employ techniques to manage your own emotions and behavior while driving. The term impaired driving refers to alcohol and to other drugs, all of which threatens all of us. When we drive under the influence of alcohol or other drugs, including over-the-counter and prescription medications, we have made a clear-cut choice. The choice has potential serious consequence. Even though the news and information today tells us about the consequences of drug and alcohol driving ability, people tend to still use drugs and alcohol while they're driving. Now, we're going to do a short quiz to determine what you know about impaired driving. I would like for you to turn to page 26 in your course guide and answer the true and false questions. Let's go over your answers. Number 1. People who do not drink and drive are not affected by those people who do. True or false? False is the correct answer. As stated earlier, 3 out of every 10 Americans will be involved in an alcohol-related collision in their lifetime, whether or not they drink or use drugs. Anyone can be affected. Our insurance rates and taxpayer dollars are affected by people who drink and use drugs while driving. Number 2, if someone is not visibly impaired, they are probably not too drunk to drive. True or false? False. Some people have learned how to control their physical abilities to extend, masking the loss of motor coordination. They appear not to be impaired even when they really are. Number 3, alcohol is the most commonly used intoxicating drug. True or false? The answer is true. Since it is a legal and socially accepted drug, more people use and abuse alcohol than any other intoxicating drug. Number 4, as long as a driver keeps their blood alcohol level below 0.08 BAC, that person's driving ability won't be impaired. True or false? The correct answer is false. While a 0.8 blood alcohol level is often called prima facie, evidence shows that even one drink can impair our driving ability. In addition, zero tolerance laws are designed to prevent drivers younger than 21 from drinking and driving. Employers may also have a zero tolerance rule for employees operating motor vehicles as part of their jobs, and we here at the city do implement this. A violation of this rule may result in loss of your job. Number 5, coordination is the first physical ability to be impaired by alcohol. True or false? The correct answer is true. While coordination is the first physical ability to be impaired by alcohol, judgment is the first mental ability to be impaired. The danger is that both coordination and judgments are affected at the same time. Because your judgment is affected, you cannot tell that your coordination is affected. Number 6, marijuana and other illegal drugs do not have noticeable effect on driving skills after the high wears off. True or false? The correct answer is false. Even though the initial high may have worn off, judgment and reflexes may continue to be impaired for some time. Number 7, light or light beer has less alcohol than regular beer. True or false? The correct answer is false. Light beer has fewer calories, not less alcohol than regular beer. Light beer is only light in color than regular beer. Number 8, coffee or cold showers are solutions for sobering up someone who have consumed too much alcohol. True or false? The correct answer is false. Nor coffee nor cold water sobers up anyone who's consumed alcohol. It takes time for your body to process alcohol. Nothing else works. After absorption of alcohol, it takes an average of 1 hour for the body to process alcohol in one drink. Now we have to keep in mind that people who have liver problems and take medication, it could take longer. Number 9, over-the-counter drugs do not affect driving abilities as seriously as prescription drugs. True or false? The correct answer is false. Unless otherwise indicated, all drugs and medications can affect driving ability. If you are taking an over-the-counter drugs or prescription drugs, read the labels before you take the medicine or before you make the choice to drive. More commonly, over-the-counter medications produce side effects such as extreme drowsiness that can affect person's driving ability. Also check with your pharmacist before combining drugs over-the-counter medications because certain combinations may cause impairment. Number 10, combining alcohol with certain medications increase your crash risk. True or false? The correct answer is true. Combining alcohol with other drugs can have a synergistic effect on the body. Synergistic is a word used to describe what happens when drugs that are taken together has a very strong effect. For example, alcohol and sleeping pills are both depressants, and the interjection of both would intensify the effect of depressing the central nerve system. In fact, each drug multiplies the effect of the other. One drink and one depressant does not count as only two drugs. When they are taken together, it may be like having 5 of each. Now, when you leave this class today, maybe discuss some of these questions with some of your friends and family. You'll be surprised at things that people do not know. Alcohol misuse before and during motor vehicle operation is a tragedy mistake. We're going to watch a video that's going to talk about the effect of drugs and alcohol. Let's watch this video.
Driving requires a great deal of skill and level of concentration, and any impairment in the ability to respond to sudden changes is going to have an adverse effect on your driving skills.
There's a lot of things that can impair you. Most illicit drugs of whatever type are going to impair you. Marijuana is not safer than alcohol.
Alcohol is primarily a central nervous system depressant. It acts on just about every neurotransmitter system in the brain, and it impairs brain function. So it decreases the ability to respond to stimuli, to make motor responses, to make decisions.
New research is giving us a much clearer picture of alcohol impairment.
In our studies, we gave doses of alcohol that were much lower than the legal driving limit of 0.08. We gave people doses of alcohol of 0.04 and 0.06, and we saw significant effects upon brain activity.
A lot of the subjects that would report, hey, I'm fine, hey, I don't really subjectively think that there's anything wrong with me, they get them in this machine, and the machine is actually showing that even though you may feel fine, your body is reacting to the alcohol, and you are slowing down how fast you can find things, and you are not finding them as accurately as you think that you are.
Even at levels as low as 0.04 or 0.05, which would be for most people probably 2 or 3 drinks, we do see impairments. We've looked at eye movements, and we see that they are slower, and reaction time can be slower.
One of the things that was very surprising to me was how impaired people can be even at a dose of alcohol where they report feeling no effect.
These drivers here today range in blood alcohol concentration levels from 0.02 to 0.07. All fall below the legal limit of 0.08. Not one of the drivers that we've had drive through our course today has passed the course, and most have failed it miserably.
Some people may decide to set a certain limit and allow, say, 1 drink or 2 drinks and think that they can go ahead and drive. The problem with that is for many, that becomes a slippery slope.
The first thing to go when someone drinks is their judgment and their ability to make good decisions.
That 1 drink ended up being, a double shot, and then they decided, well, just 1 more.
So to leave the judgment of whether to drive or not after to the time when you've already consumed alcohol, it's already too late.
We know that stress affects concentration. We know that alcohol affects concentration. So together, both stress and alcohol are going to have synergistic effects, particularly upon tasks such as driving. What we found in our studies with stress and with alcohol is that when people are stressed out, they don't feel as drunk when they've had a certain small dose of alcohol. So if people don't feel as drunk when they're stressed out, they're more likely to drink more in order for the alcohol to produce the same effect.
And in the studies that we're conducting here, we compare heavy drinkers to light social drinkers. And we find that the heavy drinkers really perceive that they are less impaired.
Even though the heavier drinkers don't feel as intoxicated, they experience just as much impairment in their performance. And so this is a really dangerous combination.
They're thinking it's a perfectly good decision to go out and drive, but it's really not a good decision for them. That they account for over 50-60% of fatal car crashes due to alcohol.
The one thing I would want to get across to people, whether they're comfortable with hearing it or not, is that there's no safe amount of alcohol when it comes to driving.
But it's not just alcohol. Other things can also affect your driving.
Even if you're very responsible, even if you're doing no illegal drugs, you still can get impaired behind the wheel.
Some prescription drugs can interfere with the ability to drive, and those drugs often have a warning on the label, and people should pay attention to those.
If you're taking a medication for the first time, it's probably best, if possible, not to interact with other medications or not to get behind the wheel until you're aware of the effects of that medication on your system. Over-the-counter medications, you can go to any pharmacy store, drug store, superstore and get these medications, and they actually may cause drowsiness, a lack of coordination, and impairment behind the wheel. Sominex, Tylenol, PMs, those types of medications may have diphenhydramine, and these won't necessarily fall into the tranquilizer category, but will make you drowsy.
Many cold medications contain the same ingredients as sleep aids, so read the labels.
An antihistamine, like Benadryl, it can also have diphenhydramine. That can make you drowsy, that could impair your driving skills. And you may not even be aware of that. A lot of these medications that you take for cough and cold may have dextromethorphan in it, which can also cause drowsiness. Sinus medications, allergy medications may be non-drowsy form, and you may think, well, that's great, now I can take these, I can drive, but even those have stimulants that may interact with blood pressure medications, heart medications.
Your pharmacist is your best source of information about potential drug interactions.
Let's look at the other side. Stimulants, caffeinated products, not just in your Starbucks coffee, but there are pills that have high doses of caffeine in it, let alone soda drink that can really ramp you up. And being overstimulated is a form of impairment. You feel indestructible, and you actually may overreact and tamp on the brake too quickly, accelerate too quickly, try to make turns that normally you would never take that risk-taking behavior. But with these types of stimulants, you feel like anything's possible, I can accomplish anything, and by golly, I'm going to get to work not in a half hour, I'm going to get there in 15 minutes. Many medications, when taken in proper amounts, are fine. They don't impair you. They're by prescription, you're taking normal doses over the counter. And then you're drinking a glass of wine, 1 glass of beer, and you think, I'm fine. Well, there's something called synergistic qualities of medications and alcohol.
The combination of prescription drugs and alcohol can have particularly powerful effects. And this is true even if you don't experience any direct effects from the drug itself. For example, sedative-like drugs or anti-anxiety drugs produce their effects at very low doses, at doses that you don't necessarily feel impaired at all. But if you drink in addition to that low dose of an anti-anxiety drug, you are very much impaired. And this is something people are not prepared for.
If you take 1 glass of wine, and with that glass of wine take a sedative hypnotic, 1 tranquilizer, even a sleep aid that's over the counter, you get a synergistic effect with that glass of wine or that glass of beer. It multiplies to the point it's not 1 glass of wine, 1 glass of beer. Now it's acting like 5 glasses of beer, 5 glasses of wine, and you are intoxicated, you are impaired, and you shouldn't be getting behind the wheel. You have to be careful what you're taking, not only by prescription, but over the counter, and then mixing and matching it with alcohol. Even if you're only social drinking, even if you're very responsible, even if you're doing no illegal drugs, you still can get impaired behind the wheel.
The number of people in the United States who die from alcohol-related car crashes is phenomenal. And it's over 14,000 a year.
The reason there are so many fatalities is that driving is actually a very dangerous activity, and any level of misjudgment is enough to have lethal consequences.
If you want to be safe, then don't drink before you're driving, and don't ride with somebody who's been drinking.
The video addressed the danger of alcohol, one of many drugs that can impair our ability to drive safely. Let's take a closer look at how often drugs affect driving behavior. Turn to How Drugs Affect Driving Behavior on page 26 in your course guide. Now let's talk about distracted driving. What does distracted driving mean? First, let's look at the dictionary definition of distractive. It says having the attention divided, rendering incapable of behaving or reacting in a normal manner. Please turn to page 28 in your course guide. When driving, a distraction is anything that takes your eye off the road. That's a visual distraction. Take your hand off the wheel. That's a physical distraction. Or take your mind off driving. That's a mental distraction. Now let's watch a video clip to learn a bit more about the danger of distracted driving.
And the kinds of things one has to do when they're driving really do put a lot of demands on cognitive abilities. Not all the time, and it's somewhat unpredictable, and that's why you can be led into kind of a false sense of security, lulled into a sense where I can do some other activity.
Drivers have a limited capacity to do things. And the problem is that when the driving task becomes quite complicated and the vehicle task becomes quite complicated, dealing with the phone, dealing with the radio, etc., it's just more than the driver can deal with. And sometimes the driving task suffers as a consequence. People don't see other vehicles, they don't see pedestrians, they don't drive at the speed that they should, they might even leave the lane.
We all have expectations on how traffic will unfold, but traffic is made up of individuals, all focused on their own business. When their focus is off the road, they put us all in danger.
Drivers need to understand that they cannot make any assumptions about what's going on in front of them. Things can change very fast, very rapidly, and they need to be paying attention. When drivers look off the road for a 2-second period of time out of any 6-second period of time, it increases your risk of being involved in a crash or near crash by 2 times that of an alert driver.
The primary task that people perform on a cell phone is conversation. And whether it's hands-free or handheld, conversation is the predominant task. If you're engaged in conversation, you're thinking about something else other than driving, and that's the problem. When people get engaged in the simulator, so they behave fairly realistically.
Yeah, I hope.
As the conversation becomes more intense, then the driver pays less and less attention to driving.
I just met her, I was giving her a hug, that's it. Oh my God.
Now he's talking with his hands.
And once you start talking on the phone, your mind becomes engaged in that phone conversation, and you simply don't see things in the driving environment that you normally would have seen.
Here in the largest simulation facility in the world, advanced technology captures realistic driver data.
One of the things that we study in driving simulators is where drivers are looking. How much time are they spending looking on the road versus off of the road? 2 cameras, our machine vision systems, look at the driver's face, and the computer then can recognize facial features. The computer is able to differentiate those targets, understand where the eyes are, and then track where the driver is looking themselves. So the computer recreates this person in a virtual sense. When we drive normally, we're constantly looking about the scene, scanning the environment. But when you're involved in a conversation, what we see is your vision sort of shrinks down. And because you're scanning less, you're really less aware of the kinds of threats and hazards that are occurring out on the road.
Up to half of the stuff that you normally would have noticed, pedestrians, stoplights, vehicles pulling out in front of you, you simply don't see. It doesn't register. It's not like listening to the radio. It's not like listening to a book on tape. It's not like carrying on a conversation with somebody who's in the vehicle. It's as if you're engaged in this conversation with somebody where the physical presence that you're in is not relevant.
Next, participants were asked to switch to texting.
I think texting is really by far the most attentionally demanding activity that you can do because it involves both a visual component off of the road and a manual component. So you have to type a message while you're doing the interaction with the phone. So you're taking both your mind and your eyes off of the roadway.
Even if you know where the keys are, you still need to verify that what you typed is correct. And second, you need to read the message from the other party. And what we find is the glances away from the road associated with these activities can be quite long, can be the order of several seconds. And that's just too much risk for a driver. Now he's really engaged in texting. So what we're seeing is a very typical situation. They forget about driving and he slows down excessively.
So if you think about multitasking as kind of juggling a number of balls, and one of those balls is driving, and one of those balls is text messaging, which ball are you going to drop?
When I first saw the pedestrian, I was not ready for it. I was texting or too busy looking at my phone, and I totally did not see her coming onto the way.
Dialing a cell phone, for example, increases crash risk 2 to 3 times that of an alert driver. And texting, which is one of the worst things that we've ever found, increases crash risk by 23 times that of an alert driver.
1 in 4 Americans are texting, will admit to it. When you look at teenagers, maybe it's closer to 50%.
The average number of text messages that a 16-year-old sends and receives per month is 2,500 messages, roughly about 80 to 100 a day. Most teenagers are driving about 30 minutes to an hour a day. So you can start to sort of prorate the number of messages they're sending and receiving while they're in the vehicle.
People are just kidding themselves if they think they can text message and drive. It's a combination that just simply does not make sense. No safe and sane driver would really try and do that.
I was at work in early January and I got a call from a neighbor. And she was kind of hysterical and said that Judy and our youngest son Joe had just been in an accident. We got to the accident scene and Judy was in an ambulance, but she was okay. I talked to her first. But our youngest son Joe, who was 12 years old at the time, was trapped in the car and they were trying to get him out. And it was just very, very clearly a bad situation. Probably about 12 hours later, they pronounced him dead at the hospital. He never regained consciousness. And we found out that a young lady had run a red light while she was distracted on a cell phone.
On September 3rd of 2008, my mother was leaving her neighborhood. At that time, a 20-year-old ran a red light, T-boned her car at 45 to 50 miles an hour, which was the posted speed limit. When he got out of the car, the first thing he admitted was he was talking on a cell phone. I just call it death by cell phone.
No one intends to get into the car and get into a collision and hurt somebody. But they will voluntarily engage in activities that do increase the crash risk.
If you get a phone call, a text message, or need to do any other task that would take your attention away from driving, pull over.
Doing other tasks while driving may seem like a good use of time, but at what cost? It takes our attention away from the road, which increases the risk of crash. The point is that driving safely requires giving your full attention to the road and being aware of possible hazards. You must find ways to manage distractions that happen while you're driving. Now, what are some ways to manage distractions before you start driving? Think about it. One of the good things you can do is know where you're going before you start driving. Make adjustments to your vehicle controls, such as your mirrors, your seats, your radios, before driving, or even after the vehicle has stopped. And leave an outgoing message on your cell phone that you don't take calls while you're driving. And what about while you're driving? Do not do several tasks while you're driving, such as reading, writing, drinking, or having an intense conversation. Do not reach down behind the driver's seat and pick up items from the floor, or open the glove compartment, or cleaning windows while you're driving. Pull over to a safe area to care for children if you have kids riding with you. And pull over to a safe area when you're driving if you need to receive a phone call. And whatever you do, never text while driving. Our next topic probably applies to all of us at one time or another. Most of us have been driving while we were tired. Some of us may have even nodded off for a few seconds when we're driving. I know I have on long trips. And when we nod off, this is called micro sleep. Drowsy driving is another physical condition that requires defensive driving. On an average, an adult needs about 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night. Anything less than that, then you're going to end up on the sleep bank, which is reality is your brain. Let's say you only got 6 hours of sleep last night. That means you owe your sleep bank 2 hours. The problem with sleep deficiency is that they do not go away. So if you continue to get 6 hours of sleep a night for a week, all of a sudden you're going to owe the sleep bank 14 hours of sleep. If you're not getting enough sleep, consider changing your habits. It only takes a few seconds of nodding off to change your life forever. Now we're going to view a video clip about fatigue driving and the danger it poses.
The reason you don't want to fight sleep behind the wheel is because you will lose. Fighting sleepiness means you're sleepy. It means you're impaired. It means that any second your brain can take one of those 2-second naps. Those 2 seconds maybe when the road turns to the right and you drive off the highway.
There was a survey done in New York a number of years ago, which was a population-based survey, and about 24% of that group reported having fallen asleep behind the wheel at least once. So it's a very common phenomenon.
Driving when you haven't gotten enough sleep, you increase the probability of having a crash dramatically.
Even if you're not actually falling asleep, your driving performance is impaired if you're sleep deprived.
The level of sleepiness all of us have, for whatever reason. Having a sleep disorder, having worked a night shift, having stayed up, having to get up with our baby in the middle of the night, all of those things will increase the probability of our having a crash the next day.
Sleep duration in America has declined over the last 20 years, and we now have about 35% of the population reporting they sleep less than 6 hours a night. And we know that 6 hours a night for the majority of people is not enough sleep. So we are a chronically sleep-deprived society.
The single most important thing that happens when you don't get enough sleep is your body drives to get its sleep. Just like when you don't breathe, you struggle to get air.
The longer you're awake, the bigger the drive for sleep becomes. And we as humans are programmed to be able to sustain wakefulness for about 16 hours. And when you get beyond that, the drive for sleep just progressively increases.
People fall asleep driving cars. Well, they don't do that voluntarily. So your body will override other activities to get that sleep.
The drive for sleep gets so intense that it will just keep pushing you to sleep. It's trying to get you to sleep. And of course, if you're doing things and you don't want to go to sleep, that's when you get these microsleeps, because the brain is really pushing you into sleep. And that could happen when you're driving your car. You suddenly go to sleep in an uncontrolled fashion, even if it's a very brief thing, because the drive is so intense.
Drowsiness was one of the more surprising findings from the 100 car study.
We use various cameras throughout the car. This particular camera is used for an over-the-shoulder view, so we can see what the driver is doing with their hands at any given time. Here's a small camera that's mounted above the rearview mirror that will get a view of the driver's face.
We found that 20% of the crashes and 16% of all of the near crashes involved very severe drowsiness.
One of the very first things that happens when you fall asleep is your brain stops processing visual information. And that goes very quickly. So one of the things that's very interesting, you can be driving your car and you can still hold your wheel, you can still steer, but you go blind because your brain, in one of the very early onsets of sleep, stops processing visual information. You know, people sort of have this idea that there's wake and there's sleep.
Let's go to page 29 in your course guide. What are some signs that you're not getting enough sleep? You think about it. You have trouble keeping your head up, can't focus and keep your eyes open, or you can't stop yawning. So, if you're having some of these signs, then that's just a warning that you need to sleep more. What are some ways you can reduce risk while driving while fatigued? Just get enough sleep. Eat lightly before you're driving. Make frequent stops if you're traveling. And never drink alcohol and drive. Never take medications while you're going to be driving as well. And if you do get tired, get off the road and take a short nap at a safe rest area. We need to address one or more topics in this section. We're going to talk about basic courtesy on the road and how to avoid aggressive driving. This fact may surprise you. A major cause of aggressive driving is the loss of personal control in some aspect of your personal life. Remember, we talked earlier, there are two things you have control of: your attitude and that vehicle. Many drivers view aggressive driving as taking control. The last video clip we're going to watch is about the danger of aggressive driving.
The man next to you, the woman next to you may be crazy. There's a lot of crazy people on the road.
Driving is one of the most dangerous things that people do every day on a routine basis. It's like having a gun license. You have a driver's license. It's a weapon.
To speed, to tailgate, to try to get ahead of the other person, to get there first, be the leader. That's aggressive.
Aggressive drivers to me are folks who are driving angry, driving with their egos.
Flipping off, the yelling, screaming, hanging out your window.
Verbal aggressiveness. Do you yell at other drivers? Or do you mutter things against other drivers?
Slowing down intentionally in front of somebody.
They zoom in front of you. They're not just cutting you off, but they're trying to change lanes.
The guy that's aggressive on the road, he approaches life aggressive. I'm right, you're wrong.
They're never satisfied with whatever lane they're in.
Not using caution on the road, like looking out for other drivers, but more focusing on yourself.
The definition of aggressive driving is to drive in a way to impose your will on others. The attitude that says me first.
Tailgating is way aggressive driving.
I'm going as fast as I can. I mean, how much faster do you want me to go?
You get the feeling, get out of my way, I'm important. I have a bigger car than you. My car has got more horsepower. And what they're really saying is, I don't take any crap from anybody when I drive in this big car.
The best defense is a good offense. So if you've got to cut somebody off, you go ahead and you cut them off.
The aggressive driver is driving along. Somebody cuts him or her off, and now they want to get even.
They will start chasing each other, flipping each other off. It's a series of choices that are escalating, and that's why I call it a duel.
That's the kind of negative emotion that can lead to road rage.
Before you respond to another driver, you have a choice. If you choose to, let's say, flip off another driver or cutting them off to teach them a lesson, you are losing control of the situation because you don't know how the other driver is going to react.
It's not in my best interest to challenge someone who's probably a dangerous human being to deal with.
Each of these little mini encounters with another driver that lasts just a few seconds can go wrong.
If I see there's a particular driver that's doing something crazy, I'd rather just slow down, get to the right-hand lane, let them pass me.
I give them a wide berth because those are folks who are probably dangerous out of their vehicle as well.
People that drive like they do, even if I get into an accident, it's probably the other driver's fault, or I was right, or the rules are too restrictive. They have all kinds of unreal rationalizations to back up their behavior.
The left lane bandit is the one that upsets me the most. A person who's driving at speed limit in the left lane, that's called passive aggressive. Why? Because that person is imposing their will on other drivers. Other drivers want to go faster. A very dangerous thing happen around such a person because the other drivers come up behind, realizing finally after tailgating this person is not going to budge. They then whirlwind around. They pass that person on the right and then they cut in front of that person on the left to make sure that person gets a piece of your mind. So you're being very dangerous and very aggressive, and all you're doing is passively driving in the left lane. You have to respect other drivers. So if another driver comes up behind you, don't stand in their way. You cannot control how fast other drivers are driving. You cannot be a vigilante driver. If you're in a hurry, you become more aggressive. You become more difficult to control your own emotions. What you're doing with your vehicle depends on how you control your emotions. So if you control your emotions, you can control your vehicle, and then you can control the situation.
A person under an emotional level can't think under a rational one. So whenever they cannot think rational or logical about this incident, they react on impulses, which leads to accidents and possible death.
I mean, we have people to see, places to go, and people get in our way, and we need to get there. And sometimes we all become more aggressive on the road than we should have. We're thinking of ourselves rather than the other people out there.
Most drivers overrate themselves. They see other people's mistakes, but they don't see their own.
It is human nature, when you see somebody else making a mistake, you attribute it to their internal attributes.
Okay, I'm trying to get over. Would you let me get over?
That's a careless driver. That's a risky driver. That's an aggressive driver.
Like they're trying to bully other people off the road.
Absolute, utter lack of consideration for anyone else and how he's impacting any other driver on the road.
The reverse, when you make an error on the highway, you don't say it that way. You say, well, it's a crowded highway out there. You blame the situation.
When you are cut off, it's because you aren't aware of the other drivers. You aren't aware that, hey, they need to get over in my lane.
Drive defensively. That means not only not be aggressive, but also means be polite.
If you are aware that, hey, this person needs to get over, they won't have to cut you off. In fact, you might be able to let them in even.
We're all going to the same place, pretty much. You're not going to get there that much faster.
Start a little earlier from your home. Realize you could get in a traffic jam. You could get in this situation that produces aggressive driving. So let's face the fact that we all get frustrated, right? We're all caught in traffic jams, and sometimes we think, it's me, but know what? It's everybody else too. You know what we need to do? Step back and see the bigger picture.
Being an aggressive driver along with all the other aggressive drivers increases your risk and increases the risk of others. You can protect yourself from that by being a compassionate and supportive driver.
Don't lose your cool. Slow down. Let the person in front of you, he's signaling, he wants in, he's turning around looking at you. Let him in.
Develop the mindset of interdependency. How you react to others will influence how they will react to others. We want to pay it forward. We want to play this positive, actively caring message to others. You can make a big difference by just what you do.
Think about what are some examples of aggressive driving behaviors that you have seen. Sometimes excessive speed, tailgating, impaired driving, gestures while you're driving, failure to yield right away, aggressive horn use, aggressive headlight use. Remember, the only person you can control is your behavior behind the wheel is you. Only you have the power to make your decisions. Every decision you make has consequences, either positive or negative. Do not give in control to your driving to the actions of others or render emotions. Let's go to page 30 in your course guide. What are some methods you can use to take control in stressful driving situations? Think about it. If you're going on a trip or going to work, allow enough time to travel to your destination safely and on time. Don't drive while you're angry or upset or tired. If you're going to be late, pull over and call ahead so you can relax. And also you can find alternate routes that avoid high congested traffic areas. If you find that you are beginning to be aggravated or choosing unsafe, aggressive behavior, try using these 3 steps in regaining control. The 3 R's. Reflect. Ask yourself, why am I getting angry? Is it really anything I can safely do to change this situation? Reframe. Think about the situation. What can I do that will help me maintain control? Refocus. Think about something else, not the situations that are causing you to have stress.